Hello, and welcome to the third series of the Zay Initiative's Dialogues on the Art of Arab Fashion. I am Emma Farmer and will be your host for today's webinar. We're delighted to welcome back so many guests from across the world for today's dialogue. Today, we are so excited to be joined from New York by Dr. Lina, Executive Director of the Arab Institute for Women, who, with Dr. Reem, will discuss Arab women and stereotypes. The format of today's talk will be approximately 50 minutes of discussion, followed by Q&A from you, the audience. Please use the Zoom Q&A function. Also, please feel free to use the chat function and let us know where you're all from. Just because we cannot be together, it doesn't mean we can't connect through online. For those joining for the first time, the Zay Initiative was founded by Dr. Reem El Mutwalli, who with her team worked to preserve the cultural heritage of Arab dress through the collection, documentation, and digital archiving of Arab historical attire and their stories. The goal is to empower and sustain global cross-cultural dialogue. Anyway, that is enough of the formalities. Without further ado, allow me to introduce you to Dr. Reem, who in turn will introduce you to Dr. Lina. Dr. Reem, we're just struggling with your volume at the moment.
I'm technically challenged. Hi, everyone. How are you?
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
So welcome back to another session and dialogue with an esteemed lady that I admire very much. Dr. Lina Abirafeh has served as Executive Director of the Arab Institute for Women since 2015. She's based in New York and Lebanon. And in 2018, Lina was listed as one of the Gender Equality Top 100 Most Influential People in Global Policy, one of only 2 Arabs to make this list. She received this honor again in 2019 from over 9,000 nominations. Lina brings a strong feminist activist orientation to the Arab Institute for Women, promoting education and research to advance social change, policy change, and to ultimately improve the lives of women and girls in the Arab region. Prior to joining AIW, Lina spent over 20 years in development and humanitarian contexts, working with the United Nations and other international organizations in countries such as Afghanistan, Haiti, Democratic Republic of Congo, Nepal, and others. Her specific expertise is in gender-based violence prevention and response, summarized by her TEDx talk, Women Deliver Power Talk, keynote address for Swedish International Development Agency annual meeting, and podcast interview. Lina is a broad member of various organizations, including She Decides, Forced Migration Review, Society of Gender Professionals, and Greenpeace MENA, to name but a few. Lina completed her doctoral work from the London School of Economics, and she published Gender and International Aid in Afghanistan, the Politics and Effects of Intervention based on her research. She speaks and publishes frequently on a range of issues, such as gender-based violence, sexual and reproductive health and rights, what's holding Arab women back from equality, bodily integrity and autonomy, female humanitarian aid workers, women in conflict, for instance, in Sudan and Yemen, and so on. Each one of those is a topic of its own, and I think warrants a whole dialogue session. Recently, Lina has focused on the need for a feminist response to the COVID-19 epidemic and its impact on Arab women and girls. Welcome, Dr. Lina, to our dialogues. And let's begin by having you describe the role of the Arab Institute for Women and the challenges you are addressing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reem. I'm delighted to be here. Hello, everybody from very cold New York on this election day. It is eerily quiet. I think this is on everybody's mind and everybody is concerned, everybody is implicated. So just to say, here we are in, once again, virtual lockdown as shops have boarded up and people are told to stay home. And the results will determine not just the course of this country, but much of how the US is viewed around the world. So with that in mind, I think our work becomes so much more important. So when we talk about things like gender equality, like women's rights and women's fundamental freedoms, I mean, those things are on the agenda all the time. And as you know very well, they cut across every single aspect of our lives, from fashion to politics and healthcare and conflict and all of that. And so to bring this back to the Arab Institute for Women, what this extraordinary place does is work at the intersection of academia and activism. So all of the research, education, and work that we do that is more traditionally academic in nature is grounded in the lived realities of women and girls. So looking at how we can impact social change and policy change around the region. And this institute has a great history. It is 47 years old, and that makes it the very first in the Arab region and one of the first in the world. So we're talking about a place that comes with a long history, lots of research, a network, credibility, so many opportunities. And it enables us to discuss topics like this and a wide range of others that you heard. Dr. Reem, thank you for that, that lengthy introduction. So it really is.
Your work speaks for itself, Lina. I mean, I am really in awe of the work that you have been doing. And as I said, each one of these topics is a sea of its own, with information and accomplishments as well as obstacles. And I'm sure they need to be highlighted and they need to be told so people will understand the work that you do.
Absolutely right. And what is nice about this is it enables us to highlight issues that other people aren't covering, or things that might seem questionable or controversial. You know, we're asked very often, you know, what is the link between women's rights and fashion, for instance? I mean, I think is a wonderful one, or any other aspect of women's lives. And so we demonstrate the interdisciplinarity of this issue, and how, you know, these aren't rights that are just viewed in isolation in a vacuum, that everything is impacted. And so those interconnections for me, I think, are very important. And we try and work with young people, at least as much as we can, to have them see those linkages and then galvanize them into action as a result of that.
That's very true. Lina, I know you believe that women's leadership is the strongest vehicle for peace and sustainable development. I want our audience to view this tape or video clip, and then I would like us to I would like you to take us on a discussion on how does this work that you do in the Arab Institute help and empower women in the Arab region. So let's watch this clip and then we go into our discussion.
كتار استغربوا حضور النساء بالانتفاضة الشعبية، وكأنهم عم بيشوفونا لأول مرة. بس هل فعلاً مشاركتنا بالحياة السياسية جديدة؟ بال43 نزلنا على الشارع نطالب بالاستقلال عن الانتداب الفرنسي، حتى قبل ما نفرض حقنا السياسي بالتصويت بال53. كنا بالصفوف الأمامية لما الحركة العمالية طالبت بحقوقها ووجهنا السلطة. رفعنا صوتنا لتعديل قوانين الأحوال الشخصية الطائفية اللي بتميز ضدنا. وبالرغم من المسيرات النسائية ضد العنف والطائفية، دلعت الحرب وكفت المعارك 15 سنة. شاركت النساء بالإغاثة وبالقتال وتكبدت الخسائر. ما وقفت الحرب لخسرتنا أغلى الناس، بعدنا مكملين تنعرف وينهم. مع كل الصعوبات كفينا النضال وقدرنا نحصل على أبسط الحقوق، مثل الحق بالسفر، الحق بالتجارة من دون إذن حدا، الحق باستعمال وسائل منع الحمل، الحق بتقديمات الضمان الاجتماعي وبالتأمين على حياتنا، الحق بالحماية من العنف الأسري، الحق بمعاقبة المغتصب مش الزواج منه. كلها صارت أمور بديهية اليوم، بس تطلبت معارك قاسية خاضتها نساء بطلات. قطعنا كتير بس بعده المشوار طويل. تعديل قوانين الأحوال الشخصية، الحق بالجنسية، قوانين بتحمي القاصرات من الزواج المبكر وبتحمي النساء من جميع أشكال العنف ضدهم. مسارنا طويل بس نحن لها.
This is amazing work, and in such a short clip, it summarizes all the issues that face women in our area of the world, as well as the world as a whole, the globe as a whole. And I wanted you to address how, through your institute, you've been working in this field towards these issues.
Well, you know, the video, you're right, is absolutely beautiful and powerful. I've seen it so many times and I find it inspiring. You know, it gives me chills because I feel like it's so important to remember how critical this fight is and how we cannot take any of our rights for granted and how we don't even know, you know, some of the rights that we think are very simple, very mundane, that, you know, the right to wear pants,
Yes.
to circulate freely, to have a license and identification that is your own, to travel without permission. All of these things, you think these have always been there, and they have not. They are long and hard won, and they have been the subject of fights for generations before us, our founding feminist foremothers, you know. So when we talk about equality and empowerment and these things, we really take a critical look at how this movement, how a feminist movement has always existed across the world, in every single country, in every place and time. It is not something that is Western or imported or imposed or any of that. It is indigenous, and it has always been there. And there have always been movements to fight for what is rightfully ours, you know, which for me in the end is a source of frustration in some ways, because we are still fighting generation after generation for things that should be granted to us by virtue of our birth as humans. But we continue to be viewed as less than equal. And so when we talk about how we raise awareness or the advocacy that we do, you know, we really need to make people aware of the inequalities that still exist in their lives. And they need to care about them fundamentally. They need to see them first. When they see them, you know, it tends to galvanize people into action, but they also need to take it very personally, not to say, well, that's not my problem, it won't affect me, or I'm not harmed by this, I'm not experiencing violence, or I'm not in a conflict, or I'm not oppressed. No, but you are. And you don't realize how pervasive it is. And so in conversations, especially with young women, we say, you know, you need to open your eyes to this, and then you will see that this is a fight that you need to be engaged in. And everything that you do or don't do, all of the choices you make have implications. How you choose to live your life, what you study, how you work, how you deal with other women, how you potentially raise children, how you negotiate with your partner, how you choose to have a lifestyle that conforms or defies tradition, whatever it is. All of those things are very political choices. So we need to understand that those are things that we have to constantly negotiate and defend, because even the rights we think we have, and this country is a great example, the rights we think we have are being peeled away like an onion, bit by bit. And we have to constantly be vigilant, which is exhausting.
Can you give us an example, Lina? I know.
Absolutely. A great example is on sexual and reproductive health and rights. You know, here we are. I mean, it is 2020, although it doesn't feel that way. It is 2020, and we still have to argue why we need rights to our own bodies. You said I'm on the board of this amazing movement called She Decides. You're right. It is a wonderful movement about bodily integrity and autonomy and the freedom to decide what to do with your body and your life. Why does an organization like that even need to exist? Why? I mean, for me, it is frustrating that we actually need to say that. And when I say in the Arab region, she decides, people say, oh my goodness, wait. If I said, okay, what about he decides? Doesn't he decide for himself? And they say, it's normal, that's not a problem. I say, but why is it not a problem that he decides for himself? But when I say she decides for herself, you all think it's a revolution and I'm trying to create problems. It is embedded in our rights as humans. It is enshrined in cultures. We need to actually state that explicitly and name it and claim it, because otherwise we lose those kinds of rights that are the rights that we're entitled to. So something like bodily autonomy, the right to decide what to do with your own body. I mean, no one would dispute that for men, but in every country around the world, we are still fighting about our rights to make our own reproductive choices, family planning, contraception, abortion. What happens if you experience violence? Because most countries will tell you it's your fault. And on and on. And all of these things where your body becomes a public, a subject of public discussion, a political playground for different pawns and different parties to wage some kind of a debate and decide what to do with you. We've seen so many times in discussions about women's bodily integrity and rights that the room, every room from the US to other countries is filled with men. And you think, how is it that men are deciding what I'm supposed to do with my, it makes no sense. And that's true in governments, that's true in across cultures, in terms of who makes those decisions about what is culturally acceptable, that's true in religions. These are all patriarchal tools, and we become victims of that, but we cannot continue to do that.
And what about looking at it from a Palestinian lens? Does it differ, or does it have a particular outcome or a particular twist in it? How does it compare?
Well, from a Palestinian lens, what's interesting is that when you talk about women's rights or freedoms in the context of other challenges, like the national struggle, like a conflict or economic insecurity or whatever it is, people will say, this is not the time for you. This is the time for the national struggle that should supersede the feminist struggle. So you will always, it's the, we call it the tyranny of the urgent, right? People will always tell you, listen, girls, this is not the time for you and your little rights. Sit tight. We'll get to that later. Don't worry. Now, the big boys have to decide what to do about peace and politics and borders and boundaries and conflict and, big issues. No, there's no peace, there is no sustainable development, there is no country or border or prosperity or anything if half of the population is left out of it. So women need to be at every table, at every leadership opportunity, making every possible decision. It is not something that we can park for later. Women need to be involved in peace, in negotiating any kind of arrangements and all of that. So the question of Palestine, because it's a very long running protracted crisis, I mean, this is something we unfortunately do well in the region. We have many of these and they drag out for generations. We lose generations of people who live their lives entirely embedded in conflict. And so it becomes harder to articulate our rights in those settings, but still they need to be there because actually women are critical to peace. Women are embedded in the communities, part of the social safety nets. How can you even discuss peace if you don't have half of the part? It's impossible.
Very true, very true. I'll take us to the next point, and that is how do you think Western cultures understand and interpret Arab dress and fashion? Has this changed over time?
I see this photo that you've put up there, and it's fascinating because I still think of Edward Said and Orientalism and these conversations that we have that constantly kind of fetishize something like the veil and this style of dress and this intriguing kind of obsession with, what's behind or beneath the veil. I saw it in Afghanistan. I've seen it in Arab countries. I've seen it in so many places where it's eroticized in this way that is that doesn't show the nuance and doesn't explain the value and doesn't explain, where women have choices. It doesn't explain the choices. In Afghanistan, we had lots of conversations about the burqa, and we were, as people who are not Afghan, highly criticized for not understanding what it meant. There are people who see the garment as simply oppressive. There are other people who will tell you it is liberating, gives people anonymity, female people, freedom to move around and nobody knows who they are. They have more room to maneuver if no one recognizes them. It was used as a tool of resistance. Afghan women would smuggle cameras under burqas and take photos and videos showing the world what was happening, the atrocities in Afghanistan under the Taliban. So, there's so many different ways to look at it, but we tend to be very kind of polarized about it. It's good, it's culture, right? Culture is a dangerous word in some situations, or it's bad, you know, it's oppressive, and that's that. But in the end, you know, we fail, I think, in the Western world to really understand what all of that, you know, the nuance of it. And now, ironically, there's been a lot of conversation about how here we are under COVID in a global pandemic, all masked and covering our faces, you know, and that's almost normalized. You know, women who are veiled and are covered, you know, I think are probably laughing under there thinking, look, now it's all of us, you know, now nobody knows who anybody is, and there you go. And I think there is, you know, there's some irony to all of this. But what's important for me, you know, is that all of these things are done based on genuine choice and freedom of the woman to choose to cover or not, to dress how she wants, when she wants, and where she wants, and understanding that she is free to do so. And I don't think that's the case in many places. And that's where it becomes problematic, when other people decide for you.
That's very true. And I think this is the key element, is the fact that it's not whether you choose to do one or the other, but whether you have the choice to be able to do one or the other.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, and that for me is core to the feminist movement. You know, it is about having the full range of choices and being able to freely select any one of those. If you want to be a mother and a homemaker, you want to be a CEO, or anything in between, you have that right. That's the kind of freedom that we fight for. That's the kind of choice that we advocate for.
Yes, that's very true. We come to this one, which I think it's going to intrigue and interest a lot of our viewers. And I wanted you to touch upon the current status of women's rights in Lebanon. Yes. And what are the attitudes and expectations that exist on women's fashion and beauty today?
Yes, that is a great question in two parts. So with women's rights in Lebanon, you know, there are some that, as you saw from the video, some that have been won, some that are incomplete, some that still remain, something like personal status codes, you know, having different sects determine your rights to marriage, inheritance, divorce, children, whatever types of things are fundamentally unequal. So there's no secular law when it comes to, you know, what is the minimum age of marriage, what is a woman's rights within marriage or after, you know, whatever those kinds of things are. What are her rights to her children, nationality, all of those kinds of things. So, you know, we are still fighting that, and a lot of women don't know it. And they don't understand that these are things that directly implicate them, you know, and this idea of, you know, I keep saying, please take it personally. Don't wait because you think you won't be affected, because you inevitably will be affected. You know, you might choose to marry a foreigner and your children will not be Lebanese. You might find yourself in a marriage that is violent, that includes marital rape, and that is not in the domestic violence legislation. Let me go into that a little bit deeply to explain that women's organizations and women's rights advocates fought very, very hard for domestic violence legislation in Lebanon that was passed in 2014. Now, this has happened slowly all around the world, where people suddenly come to realize that violence against women in the domestic sphere is not a good thing. It's not a personal matter. It is a matter of security. It is a matter of women deserve the right to be protected, and so on. And that has taken us a long time. And even in countries such as this, you know, we still have issues with women not able to report, not able to access justice, not being believed, and women being killed at the hands of their partners everywhere. So this for me is, you know, a very big issue. And so in the discussions prior to 2014 around what should be included in the domestic violence legislation, marital rape also was a part of it. Now, what happened was all of the religious leaders in the country, who generally agree on nothing, agreed on this one thing. And they said, this is not a part of the legislation. We do not accept. If it is included, it will destroy the social fabric of the family.
Really?
Yes. Now, I thought to myself, you know, I could not understand, what are they saying here? What they're saying is the social fabric of the family is built on a man's sexual right to his wife at any time, regardless of her consent. Now, that sense of sexual ownership and entitlement is not part of what I think is a healthy marriage, or the social fabric of the family. And the irony is, if you're raped outside of marriage, there are laws to protect you. I mean, however you access justice or not, however the perpetrator is punished or not, is another story. So you're raped outside of marriage, it is viewed as against the law in principle, and you're protected. You're raped within marriage, and that's just your duty as a wife. And that, you know, young women need to know that. They need to understand that. I don't want them to ever have to experience it in order to feel it. But, you know, you can, on some levels, understand that this is a very serious problem, that when you get married and you sign the paper, you are signing away your right to your own body. Right there. That needs to be changed. There is no situation in which the reverse could be true. You know, I keep saying, look at it, let's pretend we're in a parallel universe. You know, if it said a woman has the right to take her man's body at any point without his consent, and he just has to submit to that, I think people would say, what, are you crazy? You know, there would be an uproar for something like that. So the fact that we so easily accept the reverse, and we laugh, I'm laughing, you know, it is unfortunate, because we have such a big problem accepting our own rights to our body.
Yes.
That's one example.
And sadly, it is always taken either as a joke, like, you know, and people laugh about it, or it is dismissed without talking about it. And both are counterproductive to what needs to be done. Having said that, I will take you to the second point of my question and bring it to physical appearances.
Yes.
And what attitudes and expectations that exist on women's fashion and beauty today in an area like Lebanon, because we're talking about the Lebanon, and you are from that area.
Lebanon is a fascinating juxtaposition. You know, it's a constant contradiction, Lebanon, because you will see women wearing what they want, and very little of it at times, and they have the freedom to do so and the comfort to do so, and I think that is great. Everybody, you know, should be able to exercise that, but that cannot be confused with having full equality and rights. You know, your ability to wear a tank top or a bikini is not the same as your ability to inherit, protect yourself, buy land, you know, hold a senior position in government. Well, that is not the same thing. So I think young women especially conflate these, and they say, well, I'm wearing what I want, therefore I am free. No, you can wear what as little or as much as you want, and your freedom that is in the law, in culture, in society, in religion, in people's minds, in social attitudes and perceptions, is not the same thing. So I think, you know, in many ways in Lebanon, women kind of compensate in that way, or overcompensate, thinking that, you know, this is the way that they show their liberation. And maybe they're not even conscious of that, you know, but I think, you know, beauty standards, I feel like as long as you understand as a woman why you are doing what you are doing and what the implications are of it, you know, I am all about supporting that kind of freedom. But again, you know, you still have to fight for everything else, recognizing that your full package of rights are notably absent. You know, when I started to kind of understand feminism and I think build my feminist consciousness, I asked myself, I said, all right, you know, am I wearing heels because this is part of the patriarchy's expectations that I wear heels, or am I wearing heels because I like to wear heels, you know? And I would ask myself, you know, lipstick, I love lipstick, I love it. You know, now we're all masked, I hardly get to wear it. But, you know, I ask myself, you know, is my lipstick, you know, part of the expectation, cultural expectation of women to, you know, or do I just love lipstick, you know? So when you think about it that way, it's kind of, it's a lot to unpack, but at least you're being honest with yourself to say, you know, I can, as a feminist, wear my heels and my lipstick if I want, my dresses and my tank tops if I want, and I understand why I am doing that. And I'm doing that purely based on my own freedom and desire to do so. Now, in Lebanon, it's not that clear. And I don't think people have those kinds of conversations as much. You know, I think the assumption is that if you are a feminist, you will dress in a certain way that kind of understates your femininity, not seeing that you can be feminine and be feminist, and I don't see that contradiction, but many people do. But also what's interesting is if you look at who dictates the beauty agenda in Lebanon, who are the famous hairdressers, who are all the hairdressers, who are the famous makeup artists, whatever, these by and large are men. Who are the famous designers? Okay, we have some women, but mostly men. Who is creating the beauty? Who is establishing the standard? Who is enforcing the standard? And this is a place also where people comment on each other's appearances in ways that might not be comfortable in other cultures. About, oh, you really need to do some Botox, or you gained weight, or this, or, there is a lot of conversation that is about your physical appearance that is deemed acceptable. And it's more often criticism than a compliment. It's like, you need to fix yourself, you've let yourself go type of commentary. So very people true. This is a way of kind of socially correcting you as a woman to say, you're deviating, you got fat, or you've got wrinkles, or you've got whatever, you've got short hair. I can talk about that whenever you're ready.
Yes, and I wanted to remind you to talk about your experience with your barber or hairdresser, or your haircut. I think it was an interesting story that you told me.
This is one of my favorite stories of, inadvertently kind of pushing the boundaries of the patriarchy. I've had short hair for 25 years. So when I moved to Lebanon in 2015, I could not find a hairdresser, they're all men. I could not find a hairdresser who would agree to continue to maintain my short haircut. I had comments like, were you sick? Had I been ill and now the hair is growing? Why are you making yourself ugly? I don't know how to cut this. It was very painful for them to do this. And I said, this is coming with a lot of baggage. It's exhausting for me to go to a hairdresser and have to explain why I do this, but you'd look so pretty if you grew it, on and on this kind. And I said, I actually, long hair doesn't look good on me. It's not my attempt at making a grand political statement. It's purely, as I, constantly check in with myself on things like this, it's purely because I'm lazy. And also because I probably look better with short hair and long hair doesn't suit me. Very simple. So here I am making the rounds of hairdressers no one is accepting. I finally went around the corner to a barber, a one-chair guy. And I said, and it was called George Saloon for Men. Saloon for Men. So I walked in, I said, are you George? He said, yes. I said, have you cut hair on a woman before? And he said, no. And I said, I'm going to sit in this chair and congratulations to you. I will be the first woman whose hair you cut. He said, but I don't know what to do. I said, George, take the clippers and do whatever you want. And by Tuesday of next week, it will grow back. And I don't care. It's only hair. And he said, but we're not used to this. And I said, you will get used to it. And that is how I spent 4 years in the seat of George, the barber, arguing with him when he was going to change the saloon for men. I said, saloon, first of all, is not even correct English. And for men is not accurate anymore because it's for men and Lina. So we need to have this... need to have this discussion. And finally, as I was leaving, I felt like I had won him over because he said to me, I love short hair on you. It suits you. I said, see, I told you. It was a very amusing anecdote because, even in that negotiation over the choice of a haircut became a subject of conversation and became something that kind of distinguished me. And people said, oh, she has short hair. She runs a women's institute. She's probably a lesbian. She probably, everybody like loads assumptions onto you, or she's radical, or, she hates men, or what. You are weighted with all of this baggage when it's really just a simple choice of, your own personal aesthetics and how much you want to brush your hair or not.
But how do you feel regarding what's happening nowadays? Do you feel with all this technology and global interaction, social media, and so on and so forth, in an area like Lebanon, where people are very much conscious about, especially women, about the way they look, and are they gravitating more towards that line, or are they becoming more, and with all the miseries and disasters that Lebanon is facing nowadays, and all the issues that people need to really focus on, how do you feel that, are they going in this direction or the other direction? How do you assess it?
You know, the challenge is, and I'm going to, generalize a little bit, because there are diversities and there are deviations, and I think that's so important. But, what I find, and especially now as Lebanon continues to deteriorate economically, politically, with the blast, so many, I mean, it has been dealt a very bad blow, one after the other, and people have not had a chance to catch their breath and recover. Young people especially are looking for a way out of the country, which in many ways is understandable. They need access to economic opportunity. They want to feel safe. They want to have they need to have a life. All of these kinds of things. It's a terrible time to be a young person starting a life in a place like that, or really anywhere, anywhere. But what happens to women is, by and large, they tend to view their physical attractiveness or their beauty in the narrow ways that it's defined as as a ticket out, as a way to marry out of their circumstance. And I think, that is, that has been the case always. It's not just Lebanon. It is the idea that, as long as you are deemed beautiful, as long as you are attractive by, what is the acceptable standard, you are more likely to find, the right guy, and the right guy with somebody who has a foreign passport, who can take you out of there, or who has access to opportunities that you don't, or who can better your circumstance, and this is not a judgment as much as, it is understandable in the context of, when you're left with nothing, when you have no other opportunities. And I think women have to rely on physical features a lot for those types of things, and we see it even, even in so-called developed countries where, women who are slimmer or more attractive or better dressed are more likely to get a job than somebody who is overweight, or, these things are constant, this kind of implicit, unconscious bias that we have. So, I understand that women feel a lot of this pressure. But the challenge is, there's also the need to conform based on society and family and the media and, other women. And look at the famous Lebanese women, by and large, they very much look the same, the long hair, there is a type, there's a type. And women who are in the public eye don't deviate from that. So, as a young woman, you don't see the variety, you don't see the diversity, you don't see the acceptability of short hair or a different style or something. And I think that's what we're missing. The idea of, you can be beautiful. Beauty is defined in so many rich ways. And it is not just something that is a trap or a magnet or something to which you have to conform. It is something that you can celebrate for yourself in ways how you choose to express yourself. And that's why, I don't know if you want me to speak about this now, but that is why a couple of years ago, the Institute undertook a very controversial, let's say, training to work with the Miss Lebanon beauty pageant contestants.
Yes, I would love for you to tell this story because I think it's very interesting.
I was approached by the administration of the university and others saying, it just so happens that the Miss Lebanon contestants, of which there were 30 at the time, 2018, are going to be on campus at the university. And would I like an opportunity to speak with them? And I said, 100% yes.
Definitely, yes.
And I had people tell me, what are you doing? How are you endorsing a beauty pageant? This is demeaning for women. It's not feminist. It is taking us backwards. It is based on physical appearance only. It fuels competition between women. It manifests in eating disorders. It, fuels violence. It does 100 terrible things. And I said, yes, absolutely agree. But these are young women who probably have never had the chance to hear the things that I'm going to tell them. And everybody deserves a right to know. When they have that information, it is up to them what they will do with it. Do I expect a revolution of the 30 women? I do not. But do I expect to have planted a seed, maybe in one, maybe in two, to think differently about the implications of, what this means when you're standing in a bathing suit being judged based purely on your measurements and on your physical appearance? So I had, in the end, 3 days with them. We had different trainings, different trainers come in, different conversations about women's rights, about beauty, about eating disorders, role models, young women, violence. What is a beauty standard? Things like foot binding was part of a beauty standard, right? Female genital mutilation that continues in part because of aesthetics, because women's genitalia was viewed as unattractive. And, there are lots of things that have happened in the name of beauty. Breasts have increased and decreased, butts have expanded and shrunk, waists and corsets. And, you're like an accordion. Your body is an accordion for you to play with, like as if you're made of rubber. And you have to constantly think, oh my God, is it a nose or not? Is it big eyes or hair or not? Is it, what is the thing that we're supposed to do today? How do you follow that? So, I talked to these young women about it. And some of them were really shocked. They said, and one of them said, I never knew this. No one ever told me this. No one taught me this, and I will never forget this. And I thought, this is the point, right? And there was a lot of negativity and a lot of pushback from it. But I also talked about how, you are free to participate in a pageant. You are free to celebrate your beauty, knowing also that it's part of a genetic lottery. I mean, you're lucky that you're tall and you know what I mean? Like there are some people who are naturally built that way, and you can exploit that in ways you choose. And that's, you celebrate your body in the ways you want, but, make sure what you are doing or what you are saying and the implications of that on young women, on all women. I use the example of the Miss Peru competition in 2017, which is one of my favorite stories because it was a great example of women disrupting and reframing a pageant. Yes, they were there. They were standing in their bathing suits. And at a certain point in the pageant, each one goes up to the microphone and says, my name is so-and-so, I'm from this town, and my measurements are 1, 2, 3, whatever. Now, what happened was beautifully planned in advance by these women, and nobody else knew. The women went up and, first one said, my name is so-and-so, I'm from so-and-so, and my measurements are X number of women in my village have experienced domestic violence and 0 have had access to justice. And the audience was stunned into silence. And the next woman came up and said, and here's my name, and here is my town, and my measurements are women still earn this much for the same work as men, and whatever, just one statistic after another. It was like, they had silenced the audience completely. They had disrupted the event in a way that was meaningful and gave people the numbers that really matter. This idea of your bust and waist and whatever is arbitrary when it comes to how many women experience violence at the hands of their partners. 1 in 3 women and girls worldwide are going to experience violence. Women earn X cents to the dollar still in the US and everywhere of a man. Women are underrepresented in positions of leadership and decision making. There's hardly any women heads of state. There's hardly any women in governing bodies and parliament, and on and on and on. And these women just, gave it to the audience, and the world turned and said, that's extraordinary. So I told that story and some other stories as well of, ways to use your voice to the advantage of women. You're going to be in the public eye. You're going to be a role model. You are going to be influencing women, especially young women and girls. Say the right things and do the right things, and tell them it's okay to be beautiful, but not at the expense of everything else.
Yes, and what it brings me to the point of the intersection between what you do and what we do in the Zay Initiative. How do you view that? And how do we complement or work with each other?
What I love about what you do is you're celebrating the diversity. You're preserving the heritage. So you're honoring that. And these are so many pieces of history that would otherwise be lost, so you're documenting, you're collecting, you're preserving, and you're sharing. And I think there's a huge value in that. And us, in our 47 years as an institute, we do that all the time, to know where we came from and who we are, and to understand the meanings of that, and it's not just superficial. What you also do is examine the nuance and understand it, and show young women, especially, you know, I'm a big fan of showing young women and working with them, you know, as leaders in their own right, to show them the history and the evolution of dress and the implications and how people perceived it and what they used it for and why it had meaning and how things kind of come back into the public space. And your choice of dress is yours to make, absolutely, but you are not free necessarily from the impressions that people will take of your choice of dress, you know, and what that means, how people perceive you, how to honor your history, and how to take from that what is good and rich and respectful of women, and how to adapt and how to evolve and how to build something for your generation and the next generation that is not you know, completely new model, because it doesn't have to be. You know, I see the way that you preserve and document dress the same way that we talk about the history of the women's movement. You know, it's always there. It has changed. It needs to continue to be there. We need to understand why it's important, and we need to take the things that we've learned from the experiences of the past and build something that honors that, but also is relevant to the future that we want to build. So it's that idea. I mean, when you talk about things like, you know, sustainable fashion and whatever that maybe, you know, 10 years ago or 50 years ago, we didn't talk about. So you are taking what is rich and old and historic and bringing that into the modern era.
Yes, thank you. And just before we leave, and I know we are all running out, you know, out of time, but I can't let you go before I ask you this question, which was not part of my questions that I was thinking of, but I think it's a very important point that we need to touch upon. And your take on the need for a feminist response to the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on Arab women and girls in particular. I wanted you to touch upon this point because I think it's very important at this time and through what we are going through nowadays. So if you could just speak to us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I mean, and there are trends, unfortunately, all around the world that are showing the impact this is having on women. And that's for lots of reasons. First of all, that women by and large are the world's carers. Unpaid care, absolutely, but also care work that is, you know, deemed to be the lower level, nursing and whatever types of things, you know, so women are on the front lines, whether personally or professionally, putting themselves at risk. They are doing the work around the clock. They are exposed. They are our frontline fighters. So there's that aspect of it. Being a carer also in an informal capacity means that regardless of the work that you do in your professional life, you still are coming home or, you know, after hours, caring for the sick child or the sick parent or tending to people in the community. Women everywhere, and especially in the Arab region, are always the ones who are the social safety net. They know who needs help, how to help them, what they need, how to reach them. So this is kind of you know, a natural, in many ways, a natural role. And so this creates a lot of burden. So, I mean, there's a health aspect of it that has taken a toll. There's also an economic aspect. You know, women are the first to be fired or laid off, the last to be rehired. Yes. They are deemed as, you know, non-essential in terms of their work. So they will suffer a massive setback economically as well. You know, women who were building their careers, advancing, this is a setback. Many might never go back. They might not have the opportunity to go back. Jobs might be given to men first. The idea also that this prompts us to revalue women's work and what it means to take on all those burdens personally, professionally, domestic, whatever, family, community, society, and so on. Because we are all at home, you know, in the context of a domestic relationship, I would like to think, you know, and this might be the silver lining, I'd like to think that men who are now also working from home are suddenly seeing the obligations of their partners in terms of childcare and cooking and cleaning and whatever, and maybe opening their eyes to that. And as a result, one would hope, building more equitable relationships from that. Because when you see that, you know, you're homeschooling the kid and lunch has to be ready and, you know, and the grandma is sick and whatever else, that those are things that don't stop between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. You know, and that's the other thing I found very interesting, is that this has forced us, in good and bad ways, to mesh our personal and professional lives. You know, we used to think that nothing personal should happen in working hours, and we existed as if these are two parallel things that never met. While emergencies, sicknesses, family obligations, you know, anything that these aren't restricted to after hours and weekends, as our lives don't work in such silos. So now, you know, here we are in each other's homes. You know, you're in my kitchen, we see each other's children, or, you know, in my case, my dog. You know, we are integrating in ways that I think are finally showing that our personal and professional lives have always been intertwined. It's just that we had to pretend that that wasn't the case.
That's very true.
Those are interesting kind of implications of it. But then what is the most important is the increase in domestic violence, because we're talking about a situation where we're all in lockdown together. Everybody is unhappy. There is a lot of stress that has been created. People who were living in situations of intimate partner violence are experiencing it much more severely. Those who might not have been may have new cases of it. These like hotlines and whatever calls are going through the roof. People cannot keep up with the demand because there's no way to access help. Women are stranded with abusive partners, you know, if that is the case. And this kind of situation is creating so much insecurity that is amplifying violence, and there is no way to help these women. And when we're told, stay home, stay safe, that is built on an assumption that home is safe, and home is not safe for all women. And intimate partner violence is the most common worldwide, and certainly in the region. We're talking about maybe 2/3 of women who experience it, and we don't even know the reality because of the lack of reporting, because of the underestimation of the numbers, because of the stigma attached to it. We don't even know the extent. So those are some of the challenges. And, you know, this pandemic is not going anywhere. We are going to have to live with this new way of operating, this new way of working, this new way of coexisting, and the new problems that it's created. Even the new forms of violence, like cyber violence and other types of things that are extremely scary, especially when our young people spend 20 hours of 24 staring at a screen and connecting with people socially this way because they need some kind of contact. You know, we're starved for human contact. And that also leads to dangerous people who tend to exploit those situations.
Yes, very true, very true. I think Emma has appeared to tell us that we need to come to an end to this. This is so interesting.
Thank you both, Dr. Lina, Dr. Reem. Just a conversation I think that we touched on so broad, we touched on so many points, just hit the surface on so many topics. And I'm just going to ask a couple of questions which will come in from the audience, so they're not in any particular order. So the first question, what are men afraid of? Why are they working so hard to keep women in their place?
Oh, what a powerful and beautiful question. And I think, you know, that's really that's the $6 million question, as we say. You know, are they afraid of losing their power? Yes. This is true throughout history. Are they afraid, you know, that we hold a power to reproduce and they do not? You know, we fuel the human race, right? Are they afraid that we will oppress them as we have been oppressed? You know, there are so many different theories to this, and it's not an answer that I have. I think it's a subject of a whole conversation. But, you know, I do think it's about men's view of their own power and their right to abuse that power, and the sense of entitlement that they have been raised with, that they have been led to believe is, you know, brings them their perception of superiority and positions us as the inferior partner, as the number two, as the support structure, as, you know, the de facto servant in so many ways, domestically, sexually, in whatever ways. So, you know, if you are in a position of power, I think you'd be threatened. You know, you don't want to lose. It benefits you. It fuels you. You have that privilege, and it has gotten you where you are. You know, you look at men who are successful. It is not because of their own initiative necessarily. It is because they have somebody who has supported and looked after the children and fed them and handled everything else so that they can achieve their goals. So, you know, it's this kind of perpetual cheerleader function, if you will, that has been placed on women that, you know, men are by and large afraid to lose. And I think
but are we also, could we be generalizing a bit here as well? I mean, I think men and women should be partners, and I see that a lot in men when I meet with a lot of the younger generation. I think men of this younger generation are more accepted, they accept more the roles that women are taking nowadays. And I find them to have even sort of a reversal of role. Many of them tend to help a lot and stand by their partners. And I think the perceptions are changing within the generations that are coming after our generations. Don't you think so?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I think it's also in part due to, the incremental changes that we've made in the right direction. It is due in part to what I see as younger and younger generations of women being more aware, more articulate, more firm in what, in their rights and what they want. They want to work, they want to succeed, they want to have that and a family, they want to do things on their own terms. And a lot of those things are no longer up for negotiation for them. And so, I'm very comforted by the fact that, we can pass the baton, as we say, knowing that these young women are going to continue to drive that forward. And you're absolutely right. I mean, what's important to know is that, it's not to position all men as perpetrators or as power holders or power abusers at all, because actually there are men who have always been partners and allies and champions, but I want their voices to be louder. I want them to build situations, in the home, whether, with their parents or their partners or their children, whatever it is, that reflect and embody that equality. Our first understanding of partnership, of male and female roles, comes from viewing our parents.
That's
and if we see that, mom is always doing the dishes, and occasionally dad says, let me help you with the dishes. No, Habibi, that's not right. Like, those are your dishes too. It is not the language of I am doing you a favor. It is a language of we both ate on these dishes. We both clean these dishes. And how you frame that is so important for a young person who is watching and, taking notes to understand how they're going to live their life. So it's a responsibility we all have.
Yes. So true. And then moving very away from this, and I actually had to do a quick Google so that I knew what I was asking the question about. Lina, can you please tell us how we can get involved in your upcoming activism arts competition that's coming up a little bit later this month?
Easy. Submit your pieces.
Tell the viewers all about it. I'm sure
what we did. Okay, so every year globally, there is a campaign called the 16 Days of Activism to End Violence Against Women. It starts on the 25th of November and ends on the 10th of December. So this is a global campaign. Now, we at the Institute decided we wanted to do things a little bit differently. This was 4 years ago when we launched this initiative. And we said, let's do something a bit more fun and engaging and really bring young people into the conversation in ways that they might like, rather than saying, we're going to offer you a lecture, a very exciting lecture on women's rights, where even I could fall asleep. We said, let's have them think about what this means and articulate it in ways that they might appreciate. So we said, let's do it using art. Video, paintings, poems, performance, whatever you want. So we asked for submissions for people who are, I believe it was 25 and under. Maybe it's, anyway, we change it. Now it's 30 and under. Okay, thank you. Thank you for checking. Good. Anyway, I just missed the cutoff. I just missed it. So, we say submit whatever you want that is a piece that expresses how you want to end violence. In this case, it's about, living in conflict and insecurity and the perpetual state of emergency, whatever. And we have had some extraordinary submissions that have blown my mind. And that is because we've created a creative outlet. We have galvanized people who are not necessarily aware of the issues, but have used the competition to become aware. We have built what I think is a small but increasing army of accidental activists who suddenly realize in their investigation of how they're going to position their art piece that there is injustice and they need to address it. And using art to address it, I think, has universal appeal. We have gotten submissions from girls as young as 10, drawings and crayons. I mean, beautiful things that really show that we've tapped into something that is powerful. We now have a massive archives and body of work, submissions by young people in the form of, and this is men and women, both. In fact, the very first time the winner was a young man who submitted a video, and we can share those links because I think they're so powerful.
Very interesting, yes.
Short video compelling women to talk about and report intimate partner violence and, you know, what happens when you hide it. And it is 30 seconds and it's just, you know, gives me chills to even talk about it. So all of those have been extraordinary. And this is just my favorite time of year to see what comes in. So please.
And Dr. Reem, I think that links so beautifully to the Zay and how we talk about dialogues on the art of Arab fashion. And I think maybe, Dr. Reem, if you could just sum up on how you think that links, and it'd be great.
No, I think what we are trying to achieve through these dialogues is to put across different points of views, different perspectives on issues that some people think, or many people think, have nothing to do with dress, nothing to do with how we look, nothing to do with how we carry ourselves. But dress and adornment has always been an expression of self-expression. It is what you want to tell people about you through what you are wearing, by the way you're doing your hair, by the way you're acting, by the way you're talking. These all fall into this part of what we're doing at the Zay Initiative, although we collected in a tangible format through dress, but we are collecting all of this and presenting it and sustaining it so that individuals will be able to learn from the stories that come with it. And we try to empower the women by keeping their stories alive, by keeping their thoughts and memories alive through the articles that they are donating and presenting to us. Thank you, Lina, so much, really. This has been really exciting. And I am in awe of the work that you have been doing. And I know very well how these topics and these issues tend to be swept on the side, and people look at the shells rather than core of the matters. And what you're doing is something that not many people really see on a daily basis. We feel it, and we fall trap into the outcomes of what we are in. But it's people like you who have paved the way for many others to come. And I thank you for all your work, and I commend you for it, really.
Thank you. I think we are sisters in the same struggle. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I could have gone on for another hour.
Me too.
Thank you both so much. I'm afraid I am going to have to finish it, but to you, the audience, we hope you enjoyed the session. Our next English language session will take place on Tuesday, the 17th of November with Kerry Taylor from the topic Kashmir to Paisley. But in the meantime, do join Dr. Reem next week, Tuesday, the 10th of November, for our first Arabic language session in conjunction with our partners at the Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Abu Dhabi, and the Embassy of the United Arab Emirates in Manama, Bahrain, for an introduction to Emirati dress in Arabic. So I'm afraid I will not be joining you, as Salam Alaikum is about as far as my Arabic it goes these days. I've lived here since I was 7. So I won't be joining that session, but details of that session will be posted on our website very, very shortly. Have a fabulous day, evening, night. The American elections, it's a big evening.
Yes.
Where you are in the world, and thank you all for joining us.
Lina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you very much for joining, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation. It was very